Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad-Gita as it is, chapter 4, text 6. Ajopi son of Yayatma Bhutanam Ishvaropi san Prakatim Swam Adishtaya Sambhavamya Mamayaya. Please chant. Anybody? Okay. Word for word. Aja, unborn. Api, although. Son, being so. Avyaya, without deterioration. Atma, body. Bhutanam, of all those who are born. Ishvara, the Supreme Lord. Api, although. Son, being so. Prakritim, in the transcendental form. Swam, of myself. Adishtaya, being so situated. Sambhavami, I do incarnate. Atmamayaya, by my internal energy. Translation. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Purport. The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet men often dare claim to be God or Krishna. This should not be misled. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as sarup or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body, but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes birth like an ordinary living entity. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But astonishingly enough, he never goes beyond youth. At the time of Battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us. Although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future, neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun is set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of an ordinary common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother's Narayan with 4 hands and the decorations of the full kinds of full opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is, and not on mental concoctions or imaginations, which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord's form to be. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to the Lord's causeless mercy according to the Vishvakosha dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. Om Gyanantamyandasya Gyananjana Shalakoya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnumaraya Krishna Vishaya Bruleshim Mate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tanamane Namaste Sarasvabhadeve Gaudavani Pracharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pushtatri Shatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatiribhishya Kripasindhubheva Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Ajo Pisan Abhyayatmam Bhutanam Ishvaro Pisan Prakritam Swamadishtaya Sambhavam Yatmamayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Okay, so I'm just basically going to go through the verse and the purport, and kind of like through each sentence and just kind of speak from there. Okay, although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates. So actually every soul is unborn. There's no soul that's born. And our transcendental body never deteriorates. That does not only apply to Krishna, that applies to all jivas, part and parcels of Krishna, but it's our material body that is born, and our material body deteriorates. When the soul leaves the body after a few days, the body starts to decompose, starts to smell really bad. There's 3 things that can happen to the body when the body stops working. It's either turned to worms, ashes, or stool. It's turned to ashes if it's burned in a crematorium, and it's burned in a fire, It turns into worms if it's buried under the ground. Maggots start eating the skin and the flesh. Or it's turned into stool if it's eaten by the animals. So this is the stark reality of this material world. The body that we're so attracted to is going to turn into one of those three things. And then Krishna says, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So Krishna is the Lord of all living entities, but still he appears. So some people think that God cannot appear in this world. We say, the Vaishnavas say we know what God looks like, we know his name, we know his address, we know his family, we know the activities he does. And there's actually pure devotees, they can see Krishna face to face. The gross materialists or people in a low-level fanatical religious dogmatic conception will not believe that you can actually perceive God. It's just such a far-out concept that you can meet God face to face and you can actually know what he looks like. They'll say things like human cannot comprehend these things. It's beyond the human intellect, which it is beyond the human intellect. But God, being all-powerful, can reveal himself to the living entity. There's some religions, namely like people that follow Islam, they don't have any deity form or any idea what God looks like. They don't necessarily say God does not have a form, but they do say that even if he does have a form, we don't know if he does or not, but if he does, we don't know what he looks like, so it's actually offensive to concoct or imagine a form of God, which is correct. Prabhupada said that same thing in the purport, that the impersonalists sometimes think that the form of the Supreme Lord that we worship is a mental concoction or imagination. But the form that we worship is not a concoction. The people who have that train of thought, thinking that you can't worship an imaginable or mental concocted form of the Supreme, they're correct. But when we're offering the real thing, they don't accept it for some reason. And still I appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So when Krishna comes, he comes in his original form. Swayam Rup Bhagavan, Ete Chamsa Kalapumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, Indrayi Vyakalam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. Out of all the forms and incarnations mentioned, there's unlimited. Krishna, two-handed, Swayam Rup Bhagavan, Shyam Sundar with the flute. Son of Nanda Maharaj is the original form, and he comes in this form from the spiritual world. And this is one of the aspects of the Lord, is that he can expand himself unlimitedly and be performing different activities in different places simultaneously in all creation. Krishna is in Goloka Vrindavan. He's within the material universes performing his pastimes. And then of course he has so many other expansions in different forms like Narayan and Nishinga and Rama. But here he's saying he comes in his original form, and this original form was also on the battlefield of Kurukshetra with Arjuna. It's kind of like a beta tattva, because Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. Whenever he leaves Vrindavan, he leaves in his Vasudeva form. So this is Krishna, but at the same time, it's a Vasudeva Krishna. And Krishna stays here in Vrindavan, unmanifest to the eyes of the pure devotees when he is on this world, so that they feel Vipralambha separation, but also unmanifest to the people who aren't yet pure devotees. His pastimes are going on right now here in Vrindavan, but most of us are not able to see them, unfortunately. Okay, so the purport, Prabhupada is saying that the Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth, Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many, many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. And he was saying if you ask someone what he did yesterday at the same exact time, it would be very difficult for him to remember. And Krishna also says this in the chapter 2, I think it's text 12. Natvevaham jatunasam natvam nemin janatapha nachaiva nabhavishyama sarve vayamataparam. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And then he also says this in this same chapter. But, oh yeah, okay. Basically, yeah, that was yesterday's verse. Many, many births you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Because this is when Krishna was explaining to Arjuna that this parampara, this knowledge has been passed down. He spoke this to the sun god millions and millions of years ago. And Prabhupada, I just heard in a class today, he said around 40 million years ago, he spoke to the sun god Bhagavad-Gita. One time I was distributing books and I met a Christian and he wanted to challenge me. And he asked me how old my book, this book was. And I told him this one was spoken 5,000 years ago. And then for some reason he got really angry when I said that. And then he said, well, the Bible is older than that, which it's actually not, but that's what he said. But I didn't mention that it was actually spoken 40 million years ago. People won't believe that if you don't have the concept, if you don't have an understanding of our philosophy, telling somebody that this book was spoken 40 million years ago, to the sun god, they would think we're crazy. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, one should not be misled. Okay. Oh yeah, and then he was saying, although people don't have a good memory, men often dare claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature, as well as sarup or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body like the conditioned soul changes his body, transmigrates from one body to another. When he appears, he does so in his original body by his internal potency. So the jiva soul in the material world, we're actually forced to take on a body. We're forced to suffer the threefold miseries, adhyatmika, adidaivika, and adibhotika. Miseries caused by our own mind and our own body, miseries caused by other living entities, and miseries caused by natural disasters like hurricanes and things like that, earthquakes and tsunamis, or even viruses and diseases. Well, I guess viruses can be another living entity, because it's like the virus is a living entity, it's microscopic germs, so you can see it like that also. But the Lord isn't affected by these three kleshas, these threefold miseries. His form is eternal, it's made of knowledge, and it's made of bliss. You can't cut Krishna's finger. You can for pastime's sake. In the battle of Kurukshetra, Bhishma Dev was shooting arrows at Krishna, and it says that Krishna's blood was coming out of his body. That was just for pastime's sake. But you can't force Krishna to bleed. But if you did, blood wouldn't come out. Bliss and knowledge would come out. His body is made of bliss and knowledge. Our body is made of blood and disgusting things that we don't want to mention here. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. So this is also for pastime's sake. He's playing the role of a human being because he likes to. This is what he likes to do. And he likes to be a little baby and play around with Mother Yashoda and pee on the floor of other gopis' houses. He enjoys doing that. He likes running around with Balaram as a little kid and causing mischief and wrestling with other coward boys, getting them in headlocks and playing ball with amalaki fruits and playing with the gopis. He likes doing this. He has fun battling demons. He has a good time doing that. Then when he gets a little older, he goes to Mathura, and then he annihilates Kamsa. And then he grows older. He's a friend of Arjuna. He goes on the battlefield to Kurukshetra. But so it seems like, he's passing from childhood to boyhood to youth. He's just playing the role. Actually, the whole reason why we go from childhood to boyhood to youth is because Krishna does that in the spiritual world, but this is a perverted reflection. We're trying to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're trying to be the enjoyer and the controller. Where Krishna is the Supreme Controller and the Supreme Enjoyer. So to the degree that you're trying to be the enjoyer and the controller, to that degree you're still envious of Krishna, and you're going to be stuck here in this material world till you give up that propensity. But still he looks just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. So yeah, even on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he looked like he was 20 and 25 years old, but he was 125 years old. Material calculations, he had grandchildren. He had already married 16,108 wives and had sons. Those sons had sons and daughters and everything like that. Although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future. So sometimes religious people are mocked at and made fun of because people have a very shallow understanding of theology most of the time, and philosophy also. I'll just give an example. Like my family members, my aunt, my uncle, and my two cousins, they're like atheists, they're complete atheists. They think it's a joke that someone can actually believe in God. They think it's funny, like that guy's, what a dummy, that he can believe that there's someone that's in control of the universe, because they have this concept that there's a man in the sky who's older than everyone with a big white beard, and he's controlling everything, and he just has a lot of fun just watching people until they make a mistake, and then he sends them to hell forever, and he watches them burn for eternity, and God has a good time doing that. So with that shallow understanding, people don't like the concept of God. And also in the West, in America, I'm sure other places too, we have dogmatic, fanatic people who follow different traditions, and the way that they preach turns people away from God. It's actually very counterproductive. In the name of preaching, they make people turn away from religion by their crazy tactics. But if someone has a broad mind and looks at, and studies for himself and thinks for himself, instead of judging things based on a shallow understanding of others, then we can see that there's a certain trend in all the philosophies and all the religions of the world. There's like a common denominator that this world is temporary, and that there's a spiritual world that exists beyond this dimension, and that place is eternal, and that there's spiritual entities there. If you look at all the religions, that's the common denominator. It's just like if you went to a store, you had different, you had some disease, so you went to some medical store. There may be different brands of the same type of medicine. Some of the brands may be more potent than other brands or labels, but they all have like a common ingredient that cures you of whatever disease you're suffering from. So in the same way, the different religions and theologies, they all have a common thread a common understanding, but some may be more potent in the sense that they contain more information, that they contain more practical application of the philosophy, that you could apply it to your life and get the results. So that is why we have come to the path of devotional service, the Vaishnava Sampradaya, especially Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sampradaya, is because we see that there's more knowledge in the Vedic scriptures than the other scriptures around the world. It's more detailed information of God and the soul, what happens after death, what happens before death. So this whole idea that atheists think that, there's many arguments. They say one of them is everything in this world is created. Everything is created, but who created God? They think that somehow that's like a strong argument. Everything in this world is created, but who created God? I read this thing on the internet the other day where one type of like philosopher guy, he was acting like that was the what do you call that in chess when you won? Yeah, checkmate. Yeah, he thought that's the checkmate. Look, the religious people don't have an answer to that. Everything's created, but who created God? They don't have an answer. Therefore, God doesn't exist. It's kind of a ridiculous conclusion. Therefore, God doesn't exist. To make a conclusion, you need two premises that are actually real. For example, water quenches thirst. That's one premise. Water quenches thirst. Another premise would be you can get water from the temple. In the back of the temple, there's a water jug. Therefore, the conclusion, those are two premises that are true. Water quenches thirst. There's a bottle of water in the back of the temple room that you can go grab water. The conclusion would be, therefore, if you're thirsty, you should go back in the back of the temple room and get a cup of water, and your thirst will be nullified, will go away. So in the same way, to have a correct conclusion on any philosophical point, you need two premises that are correct. So if you look at any atheistic argument, you could break it down like that. First of all, are their premises correct? And if they are correct, does the conclusion make sense? If one of the premises are incorrect, then it's kind of it nullifies the argument just at the beginning. You could point out that premise is incorrect. So just to say that, what was the argument that, everything is created, therefore, everything's created, but who created God? Therefore, there is no God. Where does such a person come up with that conclusion? It's based on no premise. There's no premise to make that conclusion. It's a mental speculation. And you could go through any atheistic argument, you could see how they're all false. Another thing that atheists like to say is that if there's, God in all the religious scriptures throughout the world, God is considered the 3-O God, which means omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Does everybody know what those things mean? Omniscient means he knows everything. Omnipresent means he's everywhere at all times, in all places. And what was the other thing? Omnipotent means he can do anything. He's full of all strength. So people will come up, this is a common argument, that if there's a God who is all good, and all the scriptures say that God is all good, by the way, too. He's an all good God. So if God is all good, and he's all knowing, and he's all powerful, that means he knows that people in this world are suffering like anything. There's murders and, I don't even have to go into detail. Everybody knows this world's full of suffering. So therefore, there can't be a God. Because people in this world are suffering, therefore there can't be a God. And they say, because of the 3-O concept, If people in this world are suffering and God is omniscient, that means he knows they're suffering, and he's omnipotent, that means he can stop their suffering, but he doesn't stop their suffering. Therefore they say, either there's no God, or if God does exist, he's not all good. He must be all evil, because everybody in this world has to die. But that's still a shallow understanding of theology. They don't have a concept of the eternality of the soul. They don't have the concept of how the soul reincarnates in this material world. And they don't have a concept of karma. And that's where the Vedic scriptures stand supreme. We have in detail how the soul is eternal. Because the soul is in this material world, he takes on karma, but he never dies. The soul never dies. And actually everything is like a dream. This whole material life is like a dream. I just read this in the 4th canto, that everything we experience and throughout billions of births, it's like a dream. And then when we go back home, back to Godhead, it was almost like it will seem to us like we were in this material world just for a split second. So with that understanding that the soul never dies, then we have an argument against what I just stated, what the atheists say. That they'll say if there's so much suffering in this world, therefore there's no God, or that God's not all good. But say, for example, if you had a child and he had some sickness, a very, very bad disease, that if he didn't get operated on, he would suffer very much and die a painful death. So you bring him to the hospital and they do surgery on him. And this surgery involves, they cut him open and everything. So from a materialistic, or from a view that doesn't understand what's going on in the surgery, someone can say that the doctors are harming him. The doctors are cutting him open. They're putting all these tubes in his bodies. These doctors are evil, and they should go to jail forever. This is horrible. But someone with the correct understanding will say, actually, these doctors are healing the patient. They're cutting him open. They're taking out the cancer or whatever, the tumor. So in the same way, the reason why people suffer in this world, or seem like they suffer, they don't actually suffer, it's a dream. But the reason why people seem like they suffer, it's actually God doing good for that person. It's like a surgical operation. They're burning off their bad karma, and it may take many births, but they're going to learn that this material world is not their eternal home, and they'll eventually want to return home back to Godhead. So it's actually, in one sense, from a broad perspective, a good thing. Everything. I just read this also yesterday. The purport Prabhupada was saying, Krishna knows everything, and Krishna is all good absolute. Krishna is all good absolute, meaning everything within existence coming from Krishna is all good absolute. Even if it seems from our conditioned state of perception that it's not all good, that it's evil or it's bad, but it's Krishna working his magic. He's doing what he needs to do to get these souls out of the material world, going back to Godhead. So I don't know how I started talking about that, but I did. Okay. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, he has the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. Okay, this is another thing. I heard this actually the other day. Prabhupada gave a class, I was listening on my iPod. Then he told the audience to challenge him. The audience were devotees. So he wanted them to play the role as whatever, my bodies or atheists or whatever. He said, so if you have any challenge, please present it. And someone said, we don't believe in God because we can't see God. And Prabhupada's answer was pretty interesting. What he said was, I guess they were in a building where it was next to a road because there were cars. I didn't hear the cars, but Prabhupada mentioned the cars. He said, just like right now we're hearing cars drive by, vehicles. And he said, and because we're adults, we have experience, we understand that this sound is a vehicle driving by on the road. But a little child, he'll hear the vehicle if he's in the same room, but he won't understand what it is. He doesn't know it's a vehicle. And he said, so in the same way, the Hare Krishna mantra is non-different from God. He was saying, why are you relying so much on your eyesight to prove everything? Because eyesight's vision is not the only sense that proves things to exist or not. And I'll come back to what I was just saying right now, but I was thinking about this, and I kind of I'm going to add a little bit to this. And I was thinking, just like you can't prove to someone with your eyesight that music exists. If someone was playing the mridanga and they were deaf or whatever, you can't show them through their eyes like music exists, it makes sound. You can't prove that through your eyes, but you can prove it through your ears. So in the same way, Prabhupada's analogy, he was saying, so in the same way, the Hare Krishna mantra is non-different from God, but you have to become experienced to realize this. And he was saying, just as the child doesn't realize its vehicles outside driving, so in the same way, someone who's not spiritually developed won't understand that the Hare Krishna mantra is God. And therefore, you can prove to yourself that God exists through chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and over a period of time, you will realize that it's God. Did that make sense, the way that I explained it? That's what Prabhupada's answer to that was. I hope I explained it okay. He said it a lot better than I did, but I tried my best. When the sun is out of our sight, we think that the sun is set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of the ordinary living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations. And then he goes on to explain that there's many different incarnations, manifestations of the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it seems to us that Krishna disappeared from this world, but just as the sun sets and then it rises somewhere else. So in the same way, when Krishna's pastimes become unmanifest in this world, they're manifest in another universe. And when a devotee leaves his body, if he has attained perfection or eligibility to go back home, back to Godhead, he doesn't go to the spiritual world first. He goes to the universe where Krishna is performing his pastimes to get further trained up, and then he goes back to the spiritual world. I don't know if that's only for Goloka Vrindavan or if that's for Vaikuntha also. I'm not sure. It seems when I read that, it seemed like if a soul is supposed to go to Goloka Vrindavan, then he takes birth where Krishna is, gets trained up, then goes to Goloka. But if a soul is supposed to go to a different Vaikuntha planet, I don't know if that's the case or not. Not sure about that. Okay. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to the Lord's causeless mercy according to the Vishvakosha dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. Okay, so I have a question for everybody here. And you can answer it in a minute, because I'm going to ask for questions, but you can answer it first. So if the Lord is conscious of all of his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. So we hear that this whole universe is designed to help the soul go back home, back to Godhead. It's like a reformatory process, you know. But if the soul forgets his past life, like the soul goes to hell to basically get purified, to gradually learn that this material world is not a place to be, is not his home. But if a soul forgets all his past lives, then he'll forget that he suffered in hell, and he'll forget any lesson that he learned. You get it? You follow me? So if he forgets all of his past lives, then how is he supposed to learn a lesson? Do you understand the question? Yeah, from previous lives. The reason why he's going to hell is to learn that this world is not a place to live, it's not his home. Yeah, I understand that, but it's ultimately to bring the jiva back home, back to Godhead. Everything in this world is designed for that. But if he forgets everything in all of his past bodies, then how is he going to learn a lesson? Because he forgot everything. Anyways, let me finish his purport and then ask for questions. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self, or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. So, who wants to try to answer the question? Because I can speculate, or I can try to use my intelligence to answer it, but I can't give any solid evidence. Is there a microphone? It doesn't work.
As this soul is taking this 84 million type or species of our life, so this is only in this universe or other universes also? This soul is going other universes, or in this universe only is taking this birth?
Yeah, it's an interesting question also. I thought about this. I don't know exactly, because let's say a soul is in this universe and he leaves his until the end of Brahma's life. Is he in this universe, or can he leave this universe and go to another universe? I'm inclined to say that he's stuck in this particular universe at least until the end of this Lord Brahma's life, and he's then held back into the body of Mahavishnu, and then the universe is regenerated again. I'm inclined to say that he's in this universe. Brahmate, what's that one verse? Brahmate kone Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhakti Lata Bija. The Jiva is rotating from higher planets to lower planets, but I've never heard it say that he can rotate through different universes. I'm not sure.
But Lord can go in any universe.
Krishna can do anything. He's already in all universes.
But the soul cannot go in any universe.
Like I said, at least until the end of Lord Brahma's life, or that particular jiva goes back home, back to Godhead, I'm pretty sure he's in this particular universe. But I can't give you a solid shastric answer to that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more point was being the example of Lord was getting arrows, and the reading was coming from Lord. So somewhere said when the arrows were touching to the Lord, it was just offering flowers to him.
That's how Krishna felt, because it was Bhishma Dev who was his pure devotee. So that was their particular rasa together. And Bhishma Dev was actually shooting arrows at Krishna, but he loved Krishna with all his heart. So it felt like a devotee just offering flowers unto the body of Krishna. But it does explain that the arrows were actually hitting his body and blood was coming out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So why do the living entities suffer in this material world? That's the root of my question. And like I was saying, it's to help them go back home, back to Godhead. Would everybody agree with that? Why does the jiva suffer in this world? It's to ultimately help them go back home, back to Godhead. But if they forget everything in their past lives, then what's the point? They're not going to remember anything. So how did they learn a lesson? That's my question. Parameshwar has an answer. Yeah.
You see, as your question is saying, so Lord is giving us this birth according to our previous karmas. So according to previous karmas, we are getting birth, and happiness and suffering, distress, whatever that comes according to our past karmas. When a child is born, just like we see in Krishna Bhagavad-Gita, Balaram is making the chart of the Lord Krishna and Balaram, and he is studying Nanda Maharaj, our children are something special in this world. So similarly, in material world also, we invite our Brahman and we ask get a chart for the child, and he gives the child from this set to this set, this thing will happen to the child, from this set to this thing will happen. So he gives a complete analysis of the full life of the child. So how does he calculate those things? Because according to the stars which he is born, they calculate according to the stars, and then the calculation that shows that this person is going to be in this material world, and he has to suffer and happiness and distress also. Yes. Okay.
That's probably for a very tiny, small percentage of the population. How many people here had an astrologist read their past when they were born? I didn't. I don't know anybody in America who did.
Okay, even if you don't know astrology or anything, if I don't believe in astrology or anything, but the things are happening. Today you are happy, and after some time you are sad. So how these things are happening to you? Why that is not happening to him, and it's not happening to me? Why it is happening to you? Can you think about that one?
Well, it doesn't exactly answer the question. That's because of karma, someone's karma.
Yeah, so same thing, the karmas are there, and the karmas, who knows the karmas? Who knows your karmas? You don't know your karma, what is happening after 1 hour to you, after 10 days to you, or how long you are going to live, you don't know that one.
Okay, I have one thought. I thought about this the other day, and this is the example that I don't know if it answers the question or not, but tell me if it makes sense. I had surgery one time. My lung collapsed, and I had to go to the hospital 2018 during the Christmas marathon. I was on my way to book distribution, and it just happened. So I had to go to the hospital, and it was a really crazy experience. They had to cut me open, stick tubes in me and everything. I was in the hospital for a week, and every time I turned my body, the tubes were scraping like my insides, and it hurt so bad. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I just laid there for a week. I couldn't move, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't chant my rounds. I had to make up all my rounds after I got out of the hospital. Anyways, when I left the hospital, I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. I don't have any enemies. I don't have a worst enemy. But I was thinking like that. Even if I had a worse enemy, I would never wish that suffering, what I just went through, on anybody. That was horrible. But now it's been like 2 years almost since that's happened. And I kind of have forgotten how much pain I was in. I remember that it was a traumatic experience, but I forget how horrible it actually was. So I'm thinking kind of like in the same way. And also, to add to that, I remember what I did to make it happen and what led up to that happening. And so I avoid what led to that experience, even subconsciously, or if I feel like, oh, maybe this will happen again, I avoid that situation, or because I was doing physical exercise at that time, and this particular exercise I think caused it, so I avoid that exercise. So I'm thinking in the same way, just how I had forgotten how painful it was, I still have some subconscious understanding that I want to avoid that, so I'm not going to do that activity that led to that experience. So in the same way, the jiva has experienced and suffered in hell for a lot, or been in material worlds for many births, probably been in hell and all over the place. The super soul, Sarvasya Chaham Hridayasana Vistu, the super soul within the heart of everybody, brings remembrance, knowledge, forgetfulness, according to what the jiva desires. So, although the jiva might forget exactly in detail what has happened in his previous births, there's still, in a lot of people, a subconscious feeling or a conscience, not a voice, but some inner feeling that I shouldn't perform this activity. Like, why do people just all of a sudden become vegetarian? Or why do people know that they shouldn't steal or that they shouldn't murder people? Because they know that's a bad thing to do. Why do they think that that's a bad thing to do? It's the super soul giving them intelligence that this is not a good thing to do. You're going to harm this person and you're going to harm yourself. So that would be my answer to that. That because the soul did suffer in previous lives from his sinful reactions, maybe even in the hellish planets, now it might take many births until he comes to a conscious, even a subconscious understanding that I shouldn't perform grossly sinful activities because it's going to bring suffering. Does that make sense? Does that answer make sense to you?
This answer is okay. But you see, the super soul is in everyone's heart. But before 40 years, what I was doing, the super soul was present there. But he could not guide me what we have to do. Whatever he was guiding, I was doing that one. But after 40 years, he brought me to the spiritual understanding. Why did not, when I was 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, why did not he guide me that time? So the time is fixed for everything. Lord is saying everything is planned for everyone. So according to the plan, the things are working. And if I would say I came at 40 years and start lamenting, at 20 years I was doing so much nonsense, if that same understanding would have come to me 20 years before, that would be much better for me. But no, that up to 40 years, whatever I have to do, I have to do. And now after 40 years, whatever I am doing, previously 40 years, what I was doing, I am not doing those things now. So the Lord is having plan for everyone. It's not that whimsically we are doing the things. Because nothing comes by chance. Everything is planned. So I understand this is everything is planned by God. What is it?
Vast soul forgets the like is hellish planet like suffering that everybody hellish planets. Everyone says even if you see if somebody is suffering in this lifetime, even in this lifetime, if they are suffering, they go to depression, lot of time. They go to depression. They can really bad effects of cancer. So it's not that by suffering one learns everything. It's not by only sufferings. It's not that only by suffering the devotee of Jiva learns that he should.
Oh yeah, it's part of the package though. Yeah.
So, but why we forget one understanding like that, Jiva is. Every Jiva will know that what why they are suffering, so they may go to depression, then they will not do what they are doing. Just to save somebody, if I remember I was a dog in last life, then maybe I will always make a depression, oh I was a dog. You understand? Like even I say, even if in the present life somebody is suffering, then they go in depression. Lot of time. They go in depression, they don't want to come out of it. Very few percent people will try to come out of the suffering. And secondly, like suffering, Jiva doesn't learn by suffering only. Otherwise those who are suffering everybody will become devotee, everybody will become devotee. But they are not becoming, even they are suffering.
Well, my understanding is that eventually, it might take billions of births, but eventually, because this whole universe is designed to help the jiva go back to Godhead. Statements like that, Prabhupada's purports. So it's not that, because you're suffering in this life, eventually you're going to become a devotee. No, it might take billions of births.
This is my point. Eventually, even by suffering, one doesn't become devotee or become like a Muslim and a devotee.
Yeah.
And second thing, like this karma, this theory of karma, like if I will do, I will get this, or if I will do this, I will do this. Is like called some kind of philosophy. Krishna, this is Sankhya philosophy or something.
What philosophy?
Like if we do something, then we get something. Like
That's Mimamsa. Karma Mimamsa.
Yeah, karma Mimamsa.
Yeah.
The karma Mimamsa philosophy also doesn't like work. Krishna says no. I did everything. It's not that you do something, then you get something. That's what he told Nanda Maharaj and Krishna did.
Yeah.
That's not also, Krishna also showed Jiva. You did something, you were suffering, so it's not by suffering that you will come to me. Yes, I designed this to make you suffer because you are not following what I do.
No, I understand that. That's not what I wasn't saying that one.
Anybody understand his question? He didn't understand his question.
Yeah, he didn't understand it.
Anybody else understand his question?
Do you understand it, Parameshwar?
Yeah.
Then you want to try to answer it?
Yeah, I understand the question. You are asking why we forget our suffering. Why do you forget suffering, right?
No.
That's
One should remember his suffering though, so he will eventually learn or go back and back or try to go back or try to come out of the suffering, right? This is your question or something else?
that's part of the question. I think Parameshwar has a good answer though. Let him answer. He's a genius.
People are talking when they don't even know what your question was. Your question is why in the argument that I've lived many lives and I've done bad things in those lifetimes, but I've forgotten what I've done. So the punishment now for what I forgot I did, how is that going to help me? You know, that you give a punishment so that the kid wants to cross the street, and you might shake him or spank him or just, no, can't do that. The kid knows, okay, I don't want to cross the street, but if all of a sudden you're going through life and you get a reaction to what you did in your previous lifetimes, how is that going to help you understand that what you did was wrong? Do you understand?
Question is like, again, I'm getting some suffering which used to say, for what I was suffering, I forgot. I did something, but I don't remember what I did, but I get punishment for that, not whatever you did.
Because someone may say, if Krishna's all good, if God is all good, then why is there suffering? That's a valid question. Why is there suffering if God is all good? And our answer would be, well, the soul is eternal. There's a reincarnation, and there's karma. So Krishna is all good. This whole universe is designed to help the jiva go back home, back to Godhead. So the thing that you're calling suffering is actually teaching the jiva a lesson so that he will eventually realize that this material world is not his home, and he will start to inquire what the absolute truth is. But if he doesn't remember his past lives, then it kind of seems not contradictory, self-defeating. Then okay, he doesn't remember his punishment, then how is he going to learn his lesson? Just like he gave that example, the kid's acting bad, okay, you're on timeout or you get a spanking so you don't do it again. But if he forgets in 5 minutes, if he has some like disorder where he like short-term memory loss, then what's good is that gonna do to the child? He's not gonna learn his lesson. So I've been asked this on book distribution. How does that actually? You understand? I think he understands. Yeah. Yeah.
So he said that this is if I'm suffering for something which I did, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
Somebody's
He's asking a question.
This no, not saying.
So he'll ask you a question and somebody wants to know the answer.
So that person is that the same asking I'm suffering. When you forget that what you did, that you are suffering. And this is the things that you did. Let us say somebody can learn whatever was covered in this. Understand what saying. All you will do is that's all you are suffering. There's a lot of time we hear this pastime of Shastra examples. In Mahabharata especially when you hear about Vishnu, the advice and the word of God, what he did like this. And that life remember?
Anyways.
Vishnu was on the bread of heaven. Then this Shastra like we found that he threw one snake by his arrow or by his whatever. His arm. That time some arrow and then this snake fell down on the this. Can't take it. No, it's
Anyways, it's okay.
Something which is like pinpointed. This snake fell down on that animal on this thing, so that's why Vishnu Deva is getting this suffering. So now your question is like if somebody forgets, if he doesn't remember, then he's getting some suffering. And God is all good.